Part 1. Hey guys, tonight we leave behind mighty emperors, thunderous battles, and ambitious generals to spend time with someone history almost forgot. Tonight, you'll follow the peaceful daily routine of a humble Korean scholar living during the Joseon Dynasty, a man whose name never appears in famous history books, whose writings never change the fate of kingdoms, and whose life passes quietly beneath the shadow of mountains and pine trees. You'll wander through misty village paths before dawn, listen to the scratch of brush on paper, sip warm tea beside wooden windows, and spend a gentle day among books, poetry, gardens, and quiet reflection. Honestly, after spending time with kings and conquerors, a forgotten scholar sounds wonderfully relaxing. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these peaceful journeys through history. And while you're getting comfortable tonight, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now dim the lights, settle beneath a blanket, and let's quietly step into a forgotten corner of old Korea. The village still sleeps. Night has not fully released its hold on the world. Above the tiled rooftops, the stars remain visible, though faintly. The eastern horizon carries only the slightest hint of approaching dawn. The air feels cool, fresh, filled with the scent of damp earth and pine trees. You walk along a narrow path between stone walls and traditional wooden homes while the village rests beneath a blanket of silence. No merchants, no farmers, no children. Only the distant sound of a stream moving through the darkness somewhere beyond the rice fields. Ahead stands a modest house, not large, not wealthy, not impressive by official standards. And yet there is something peaceful about it. A tiled roof curves gently toward the sky. A bamboo fence surrounds a small courtyard. Pine trees stand watch near the entrance. This is where the scholar lives. Not a famous scholar, not a royal advisor, not a celebrated philosopher. Simply a man who devoted his life to learning. The Joseon Dynasty, which ruled Korea for more than 5 centuries, placed enormous importance on scholarship, education, and Confucian ideals. Learned men often occupied respected positions within society, though only a small number achieved lasting fame. Many spent their entire lives studying quietly in villages much like this one, and most are forgotten today. The house remains dark for a few moments longer. Then a soft glow appears behind a paper-covered window. The scholar is awake. Honestly, scholars throughout history seem strangely committed to waking up before anyone else. Inside, a small oil lamp flickers to life. The warm light spills across wooden floors polished smooth by years of use. Books rest neatly upon shelves. Brushes hang carefully beside a writing desk. A folded blanket lies in one corner of the room. Everything appears orderly, purposeful, simple. The scholar moves quietly through the house. His movements are unhurried. There is no rush, no urgency. The day has barely begun. He opens the wooden door and steps into the courtyard. The cold morning air greets him immediately. Above, the final stars begin fading. Around him, the world remains still. For several moments, he simply stands there, breathing, listening, watching the darkness soften around the edges. Historians are still debating how closely surviving records reflect the daily lives of ordinary Joseon scholars versus elite officials, but many personal writings describe mornings much like this, quiet moments of reflection before the responsibilities of the day begin. The scholar walks slowly toward a stone basin near the garden. Water collected from the nearby stream sits cool and clear beneath the fading stars. He washes his face, his hands. The simple ritual helps welcome the day. Nearby, bamboo leaves rustle softly in a gentle breeze. A bird calls once from a pine branch overhead. The first sound of morning. The scholar smiles faintly, not because anything extraordinary has happened, because ordinary mornings are enough. Inside the house, the oil lamp continues glowing softly beside stacks of carefully preserved books. Ancient texts, poetry collections, Confucian classics copied by hand generations earlier. Knowledge waiting patiently for another day of study. The eastern sky brightens slightly. The village begins stirring. A distant rooster announces its opinion about the sunrise, another answers, then another. The world is waking, but slowly, very slowly. The scholar returns indoors and kneels beside his writing desk. The day has officially begun. The books wait. The lamp glows warmly. And in a quiet village nestled beneath the mountains of Joseon, Korea, While dawn slowly unfolds across tiled rooftops and mist-covered rice fields, the peaceful routine of a forgotten scholar begins once more. Part 2. The lamp burns softly beside the scholar's desk. Outside, dawn continues spreading across the village in slow shades of silver and pale blue. The rooftops of neighboring homes emerge gradually from the darkness, while thin wisps of mist drift above the nearby rice fields. Inside the house, however, the day begins not with noise, but with preparation. Honestly, some people start their mornings by checking messages. A Joseon scholar begins by making sure his inkstone is properly arranged. Different priorities. The scholar settles onto a woven mat before a low wooden desk polished by decades of use. Everything has its place. Brushes rest carefully in a bamboo holder. Sheets of handmade paper sit stacked neatly to one side. Several thread-bound books await study. An inkstone occupies the center of the desk like a trusted old companion. The room contains very little unnecessary decoration. No expensive furniture, no grand displays of wealth, only the tools required for learning. And for many scholars of Joseon Korea, that is enough. The Joseon Dynasty places extraordinary value upon education and Confucian scholarship. Success in civil service examinations offers one of the few paths toward government office and social advancement. As a result, countless young men devote years, sometimes entire lifetimes, to study. Most never achieve official positions, yet many continue learning anyway. The scholar reaches for a small ceramic container and pours fresh water onto the inkstone. Slowly, he begins grinding an inkstick against the smooth surface. The movement is steady, circular, unhurried. The soft sound fills the room. Stone, water, ink, a morning ritual repeated across generations. Historians are still debating how much time ordinary scholars spent preparing writing materials compared to elite officials with greater resources, but surviving diaries often describe these small acts in remarkable detail. Preparation itself becomes part of the discipline. One does not simply begin writing. One prepares to write. The ink gradually darkens. Rich black liquid gathers within the stone. The scholar tests its consistency with the tip of a brush. Satisfied, he nods gently. Outside, a few villagers begin appearing on distant pathways. Farmers move toward fields. Women carry baskets toward wells. Smoke rises from cooking fires throughout the village. Life begins. The scholar opens the first book of the morning. Its pages have yellowed slightly with age. The edges show careful wear from years of reading, a Confucian classic copied by hand long ago. The brush moves slowly across the page as he traces familiar passages. Not because he has forgotten them, because repetition matters. Confucian education emphasizes continuous study, self-cultivation, and moral refinement. Knowledge is not something acquired once and completed. It is practiced, revisited, deepened over time. The scholar reads quietly while dawnlight gradually joins the glow of the lamp. The room brightens. Shadows retreat from the corners. A pine branch outside sways gently against the paper window. For several minutes, nothing interrupts the silence, only the occasional turning of a page, the scratch of brush against paper, the distant calls of waking birds. The pace feels almost impossibly calm, and yet there is purpose here. The scholar copies a short passage onto fresh paper. Each character requires concentration, balance, patience. A single careless stroke changes meaning entirely. The brush rises and falls gracefully. Ink flows across the page like dark water. Calligraphy in Joseon Korea is not merely practical handwriting. It is often viewed as an extension of character itself, a reflection of discipline, temperament, and inner cultivation. At least ideally, though historians occasionally discover examples suggesting some scholars simply had very messy handwriting. The scholar pauses briefly and gazes through the paper window. Morning sunlight now touches the distant hills beyond the village. The mountains emerge from the mist. Soft, blue, ancient, he smiles faintly, not because of any great revelation, because the morning is beautiful. Sometimes that is enough. The book remains open before him. The lamp still burns softly. Fresh ink waits within the stone. And in a quiet house beneath the mountains of Joseon Korea, while sunlight slowly spreads across rice fields, tiled rooftops, and winding village paths beyond the garden wall, a forgotten scholar continues his peaceful morning among books, brushstrokes, and the quiet discipline of learning. Part 3. The morning sunlight grows stronger now. Golden light filters softly through the paper-covered windows. gradually replacing the warm glow of the oil lamp. The scholar studies for a few moments longer before finally setting down his brush. The ink dries quietly upon the page. The books remain open. But another part of the morning awaits. Tea. Honestly, history has produced countless philosophies, political systems, and educational traditions. Yet many scholars eventually arrive at the same conclusion. Everything feels slightly more manageable after tea. The scholar rises from his desk and moves toward a small wooden shelf near the kitchen area. The house remains simple. One room flows naturally into another. Nothing feels extravagant. Everything serves a purpose. A small iron kettle rests near a charcoal brazier where a gentle fire has already been prepared. The scholar adds water collected earlier from the stone basin in the courtyard. Soon tiny bubbles begin forming along the edges of the kettle. The sound is soft, comforting, almost musical. Outside, the village has fully awakened now. You hear distant footsteps on stone paths, the faint creak of wooden carts, birds calling from pine trees scattered across the hillsides. Yet inside the house, calm still reigns. The scholar opens a ceramic container and removes several carefully dried tea leaves. Not many. Tea remains valuable. Every leaf is treated with respect. The leaves are placed gently into a small clay teapot worn smooth by years of daily use. The kettle begins to steam. A delicate fragrance rises into the room. Earthy, fresh, subtle. The kind of scent that encourages quiet thinking. Tea culture becomes deeply woven into many aspects of East Asian scholarly life. In Joseon, Korea, tea often accompanies study, reflection, conversation, and moments of solitude, not always as elaborate ceremony, sometimes simply as a peaceful habit, a small daily ritual that helps organize the rhythm of life. The scholar pours hot water into the teapot and waits patiently, no rushing. Tea demands patience too, a recurring theme this morning. The books wait. The day waits. There is no need to hurry. For several moments, he simply watches the steam rise, thin white ribbons twisting gently through the morning light. The room feels warm now, peaceful. The scholar carries the teapot and a single cup into the courtyard. Outside, dew still clings to bamboo leaves along the garden fence. A stone path winds between patches of moss and carefully tended shrubs. Nothing in the garden appears grand, yet everything feels intentional. A small pine tree, several flowering plants, a stone lantern darkened by age. The scholar settles onto a wooden platform overlooking the garden. The first cup of tea is poured. Steam curls upward, the fragrance drifts the cool morning air. He takes a slow sip and smiles. Not dramatically, just enough. The tea is good. The mountains beyond the village stand quietly beneath the morning sky. Mist still lingers in low valleys. Sunlight touches distant ridgelines. Everything appears calm, stable, timeless. Historians are still debating how frequently ordinary village scholars enjoyed tea compared to wealthier elites, since tea quality and availability varied significantly throughout different periods of Joseon history. But surviving diaries and writings repeatedly mention tea as a companion to learning and reflection. The connection becomes difficult to ignore. Nearby, a sparrow lands briefly on the garden wall. The bird studies the scholar. The scholar studies the bird. Neither seems particularly impressed by the other. Eventually, the sparrow departs. The tea remains. The scholar pours another cup. For a while, he does nothing at all. No reading, no writing, no studying, only sitting quietly, watching sunlight move through bamboo leaves, listening to distant sounds from the village, breathing the cool mountain air. Modern life often treats stillness as wasted time. The scholar disagrees completely. For him, reflection forms part of learning itself. The world teaches lessons too. One simply has to pay attention. The tea gradually cools. The sun climbs higher. Soon it will be time to leave the house and walk the village paths. But not yet. For now, there is only morning light, warm tea, and a peaceful garden beneath the mountains. And in a quiet corner of Joseon, Korea, while sunlight spreads across tiled rooftops and mist drifts gently through distant valleys beyond the village, a forgotten scholar begins his day not with ambition or urgency, but with tea, silence, and the simple pleasure of watching the world awaken. Part 4. The final cup of tea has grown cool. The scholar sets the clay cup carefully beside him and gazes once more across the small garden. The bamboo leaves sway gently in the morning breeze. Sunlight now reaches the stone lantern near the garden wall. The mist hanging over the distant valley begins slowly dissolving into the warmth of the day. The world is awake, and it is time to walk. Honestly, scholars throughout history seem unusually fond of walking. Whenever they are not reading, writing, teaching, debating, or drinking tea, they are often wandering thoughtfully down roads while contemplating very serious ideas. The scholar rises from the wooden platform and steps into the courtyard. His robes move softly in the breeze. He closes the garden gate behind him and begins making his way toward the village path. The road is narrow, packed earth bordered by low stone walls and clusters of wild grasses. Morning sunlight filters through pine branches overhead, scattering patches of gold across the ground. The air feels cool but pleasant, a perfect morning for walking. The village has fully awakened now. Smoke curls from chimneys, children carry buckets toward wells, farmers move steadily toward nearby fields. The rhythm of daily life unfolds quietly around him, yet nobody appears rushed. The pace of the village follows nature more than clocks. A lesson many modern cities seem determined to forget. The scholar walks slowly. There is no destination requiring urgency. The walk itself matters. In Joseon, Korea, many scholars view time spent outdoors as an important companion to study. Nature provides opportunities for observation, reflection, and self-cultivation. Books teach wisdom. The landscape teaches perspective. At least, that is the ideal. A farmer passing with a wooden cart offers a respectful nod. The scholar returns it warmly. Neither stops for conversation. Both understand the value of quiet mornings. Ahead, the path leaves the cluster of village houses and begins winding gently between rice fields. The fields shimmer beneath the sunlight. Thin channels of water reflect the blue sky above. Young shoots sway softly whenever the breeze crosses the valley. The site feels peaceful, ordered, carefully maintained. Every field represents countless hours of labor. Yet from a distance, the work appears effortless. Historians are still debating how closely Confucian ideals shape the daily routines of ordinary village scholars throughout different periods of Joseon history, but surviving journals frequently describe long walks through agricultural landscapes similar to these. The countryside becomes a classroom of its own. The scholar pauses briefly beside a small stream. Clear water tumbles over smooth stones polished by centuries of flow. He watches silently for a moment. Nearby, dragonflies skim the surface. Tiny fish dart between shadows beneath the water. Nothing remarkable, and yet somehow entirely remarkable. A recurring theme of the morning. The scholar continues walking. The path begins climbing gently toward the foothills beyond the village. Pine trees become more common here. Their scent fills the air, fresh, resinous, calming. The sound of the village fades gradually behind him. Soon only birdsong remains. A magpie calls from a distant branch. Another answers. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a woodpecker taps steadily against bark. The mountains seem closer now. Their slopes rise in layers of green and blue beneath the clear sky. Generations of Korean poets write about mountains. Generations of scholars walk among them. The connection feels easy to understand. Mountains encourage humility. They have seen far more history than any human ever will. The scholar reaches a small ridge overlooking the valley below. From here, the village appears tiny, a scattering of tiled roofs nestled among fields and trees. Smoke rises lazily into the morning air. Life continues below, quietly, steadily. He sits upon a flat stone beneath a pine tree. No book accompanies him, no brush, no paper, only the view. For several minutes he simply observes the fields, the river, the distant roads winding through the countryside. Confucian teachings emphasize self-discipline and study, but many scholars also believe reflection requires moments away from texts and lessons. Knowledge must settle, thoughts must breathe. Wisdom grows slowly, like trees, like mountains, like mornings. The breeze moves gently through the pine needles overhead. Sunlight dances across the hillside. The valley glows beneath the growing day. And on a quiet ridge overlooking the peaceful countryside of Joseon, Korea, while farmers work distant fields and village life unfolds below the mountains, a forgotten scholar continues his morning walk among pine trees, fresh air, and the timeless lessons found beyond the pages of books. Taffer, Part 5. The valley stretches peacefully below. Rice fields shimmer beneath the morning sun, while thin ribbons of water wind through the countryside like polished silver threads. The village rests comfortably among trees and low hills. its tiled rooftops glowing softly beneath the clear sky. The scholar remains seated beneath the pine tree for a few moments longer. The breeze moves gently through the branches overhead. The scent of pine needles fills the air. Fresh, clean, familiar. Eventually, he rises. The morning walk continues. Honestly, scholars seem to possess a remarkable ability to turn an ordinary walk into a 3-hour philosophical experience. The path climbs gradually along the hillside. Pine trees grow thicker here, creating patches of cool shade across the ground. Fallen needles soften each step while birds move quietly among the branches overhead. The sounds of the village fade almost completely. Only nature remains, a distant stream, the wind, birdsong. The scholar seems entirely content with the arrangement. Ahead, a small clearing appears between the trees. At its center rests a simple wooden platform built many years earlier. Nothing elaborate, just a sheltered place where travelers, monks, and scholars occasionally stop to rest. The platform overlooks the valley, a perfect place for study. The scholar settles onto the wooden boards and removes a small cloth bundle he has carried beneath his arm. Inside are several books, carefully wrapped, carefully protected. Books are precious possessions, especially handwritten ones. During the Joseon Dynasty, books remain valuable objects requiring considerable effort to produce. Woodblock printing exists, but many texts are still copied by hand, preserved carefully, and passed through generations. A scholar may own only a modest collection, yet know every page intimately. The scholar selects one volume and opens it gently. The pages reveal passages from Confucian classics, ancient teachings that have guided generations of students throughout East Asia. For many Joseon scholars, these texts are not simply educational materials. They are companions, lifelong companions. The scholar begins reading quietly. The words move slowly, thoughtfully. There is no rush to finish, no race toward completion. Understanding matters more than speed, a lesson modern readers occasionally struggle to appreciate. Sunlight filters through the pine branches above, creating shifting patterns across the pages. The scholar pauses often, sometimes to reread a passage, sometimes to consider its meaning, sometimes simply to watch clouds drift across the mountains. All three seem equally important. Historians are still debating how deeply Confucian education shapes everyday life among different social classes of Joseon Korea, but among scholars, the influence becomes nearly impossible to overstate. Education is not viewed merely as a path toward employment. It becomes a method of self-cultivation, a lifelong effort to improve one's character, at least in theory. Reality, as always, proves somewhat more complicated. A squirrel appears briefly near the edge of the clearing. It studies the scholar. The scholar studies the squirrel. The squirrel seems unimpressed by Confucian philosophy, then disappears into the trees, a fair response. The scholar smiles faintly and returns to his reading. Nearby, the wind stirs the pine branches. Their soft rustling creates a natural rhythm beneath the silence. Many Korean scholars throughout history develop deep affection for pine trees. The reason is partly symbolic. Pines remain green through winter. They endure hardship without losing their character, a quality Confucian scholars greatly admire. The scholar closes the book for a moment and gazes toward the mountains beyond the valley. Layer upon layer of blue ridges stretch toward the horizon, ancient, patient, unmoved by human concerns. Countless generations have looked upon these same mountains, kings, farmers, monks, poets, and forgotten scholars. The mountains remember none of their names. Yet somehow that thought feels comforting rather than sad. The morning continues passing gently. The sun climbs higher, the shadows shorten, the pages turn one by one. And beneath the shelter of ancient pine trees overlooking the peaceful countryside of Joseon, Korea, while birds sing among the branches and distant villages go about their daily work below, a forgotten scholar spends another quiet hour among books, mountains, and the timeless pursuit of understanding. Part 6. The pages turn slowly in the mountain breeze. The scholar remains seated upon the wooden platform beneath the pine trees while sunlight filters through the branches overhead. The morning has grown warmer now. Mist has vanished from the valley. The rice fields below gleam beneath the sun. And yet the clearing remains wonderfully cool. The pines take their responsibilities seriously. Honestly, pine trees may be among history's most dependable supporting characters. They appear in countless poems, paintings, and philosophical reflections, and somehow never demand credit. The scholar finishes reading the passage before him and closes the book carefully, not because he has finished learning, because another part of learning now begins. Practice. He reaches into the cloth bundle once more and removes a small writing case. Inside are brushes, ink, and folded sheets of paper protected against the mountain air. Everything is arranged with care. Years of habit have made the process effortless. The brush is placed beside the inkstone. Water is added. The familiar ritual begins again. Grinding, slow circles, stone against stone. The sound blends gently with birdsong and rustling pine needles. The scholar watches the ink darken gradually. There is no hurry. Good ink takes time. Good writing does too. Throughout Joseon, Korea, calligraphy occupies a special place within scholarly life. Beautiful handwriting is often viewed as evidence of discipline, patience, education, and moral character. A person's brushwork can reveal far more than the words themselves. At least, that is what many scholars believe. The scholar lifts the brush. The tip touches paper. The first character appears. Simple, balanced, graceful. A single stroke follows another. Dark ink flows smoothly across the page. Each movement feels deliberate, measured. The brush rises and falls like a dancer moving through familiar steps. There is something deeply calming about watching it. No sudden movements, no corrections, no rushing, only concentration. The wind stirs softly through the clearing. A few pine needles drift across the wooden platform. The scholar barely notices. His attention remains entirely on the page. Historians are still debating how much formal calligraphy training ordinary scholars received compared to elite members of the Yangbang class. But surviving examples show that beautiful handwriting is admired across many levels of educated society. Practice remains essential. Every scholar writes. Some write exceptionally well. Others simply write often enough to convince themselves they are improving. A timeless educational strategy. The scholar completes one line and pauses. He studies the characters carefully, not critically, just thoughtfully. Then begins another. The passages he copies come from familiar texts, words he has read many times before. Yet repetition never seems to diminish their value. Each copy becomes an opportunity to refine both hand and mind. The sun continues climbing above the mountains. Light moves gradually across the clearing. A butterfly lands briefly upon the edge of the platform before drifting away again. The scholar does not look up. For the moment, the page contains his entire world. Brush, ink, paper, breath. Nothing else is required. One completed sheet dries beside him, then another. The characters stand neatly in ordered rows, elegant without being flashy, disciplined without being rigid. The result reflects years of quiet effort, not talent alone, persistence. Many scholars throughout history discover that greatness often arrives disguised as repetition. The same task, the same practice, day after day, year after year, until excellence becomes habit. The scholar finally sets the brush down and flexes his fingers gently. A small smile crosses his face. The work has gone well, not perfectly. Perfection is rarely the goal. Progress is enough. The valley remains peaceful below. The mountains remain unchanged above. The pine trees continue whispering softly in the breeze. And beneath their sheltering branches, on a quiet hillside of Joseon, Korea, while sunlight warms the countryside and birds move through the forest overhead, a forgotten scholar spends another tranquil hour practicing the ancient art of calligraphy, one careful brushstroke at a time. Part 7. The final sheet of calligraphy dries quietly beside the scholar. The ink gleams slightly in the sunlight before gradually settling into the paper. Around him, the pine forest remains peaceful, filled with the soft sounds of wind moving through branches and birds calling from hidden perches among the trees. The morning has nearly reached midday. The air feels warmer now. The valley below glows beneath clear skies, and after several hours of reading, reflection, and writing, the scholar decides it is time to return home. Honestly, even the most dedicated scholar eventually remembers that lunch exists. The books are wrapped carefully once more, the brushes cleaned, the inkstone packed away. Nothing is left behind. The scholar rises from the wooden platform and takes one last look across the countryside. The mountains remain as they have always been, silent, patient, endlessly unconcerned with human schedules. Then he begins the walk back toward the village. The downhill path feels different now. The forest has fully awakened. Sunlight pours through the pine branches in bright shafts of gold. Insects hum softly among wildflowers growing beside the trail. The world feels alive, yet still calm. The scholar walks at the same unhurried pace as before. No rush, no destination demanding urgency. The village waits, lunch waits, the day unfolds exactly as it should. As he approaches the rice fields once more, signs of daily life become increasingly visible. Farmers work knee-deep in water beneath wide straw hats. Oxen pull simple wooden plows through prepared soil. Children carry baskets along narrow paths between fields. Everyone has tasks to complete. Everyone contributes. The rhythm of village life depends upon countless small efforts working together, a lesson the scholar appreciates deeply. Though his own work looks very different from theirs, historians are still debating how closely village scholars interacted with farming communities in different regions of Joseon Korea, but many local scholars maintain strong connections with the people around them. Some teach children, some help draft documents, some serve as informal advisors, and many simply remain respected members of their communities. The scholar pauses briefly beside a small bridge crossing a narrow stream. The water sparkles beneath the midday sun. Nearby, several children are attempting to catch tiny fish using woven baskets. Their success appears limited. Their enthusiasm remains excellent. One boy proudly holds up something approximately half the size of his thumb. The others react as though he has conquered the sea. The scholar smiles. The children immediately bow respectfully, then return to their fishing experiment with renewed determination, a wise use of time. Soon the village rooftops appear once more between clusters of bamboo and pine. Smoke rises from cooking fires. The smell reaches him before he reaches the house. Rice, vegetables, soup, simple foods prepared for the midday meal. The scent feels welcoming, comforting, home. The scholar steps through the garden gate and enters the courtyard. Sunlight illuminates the bamboo leaves along the fence. A small breeze stirs the flowers planted beside the stone path. Everything appears exactly as he left it. The books are carried indoors, placed carefully upon the shelf. The writing tools return to their proper places. Only then does he move toward the kitchen area. A modest meal waits, nothing extravagant. A bowl of freshly cooked rice, vegetable side dishes prepared from seasonal ingredients. A light soup still steaming gently, perhaps a small portion of tofu, perhaps some preserved vegetables. Simple foods, nutritious foods. The sort of meal eaten by countless ordinary people throughout Joseon Korea. The scholar kneels beside the low table and pauses for a moment, not out of ritual alone, out of gratitude. The meal reflects many unseen efforts. Farmers, neighbors, merchants, family. No one truly lives alone. Even scholars surrounded by books depend upon countless others. The first bite is taken slowly. The rice is warm, the soup comforting, the vegetables fresh. Nothing remarkable, and somehow completely remarkable. Outside, the village continues its daily work beneath the bright afternoon sun. Inside, a forgotten scholar enjoys a simple midday meal after a peaceful morning among books and pine trees. And in a quiet house nestled beneath the mountains of Joseon, Korea, while farmers tend fields, children play beside streams, and warm sunlight settles across tiled rooftops and garden walls, another gentle chapter of an ordinary life unfolds with quiet dignity and calm. Part 8. The midday meal comes to a peaceful end. The bowls have been emptied. The soup has cooled. Outside, the village hums softly beneath the warm afternoon sun, while shadows shorten across the courtyards and narrow paths between houses. The scholar sits quietly for a few moments longer, not because he is tired, because there is no reason to rush. Honestly, one of the forgotten skills of history may simply be finishing lunch without immediately checking 15 different notifications. The low table is cleared carefully, every bowl washed, every utensil returned to its place. Order matters, not rigidly, not obsessively, simply as part of daily life. The scholar wipes the table with a cloth and gazes briefly through the open doorway toward the garden. Bamboo leaves shimmer in the sunlight. A dragonfly hovers above a patch of flowers. Somewhere beyond the walls, children can be heard laughing. The afternoon has arrived, and with it comes another responsibility: teaching. Not every scholar in Joseon, Korea becomes a famous official or court advisor. Many spend their lives educating others, passing knowledge from one generation to the next, a quieter legacy, yet perhaps a more enduring one. The scholar gathers several books and places them inside a cloth satchel. The volumes are worn from years of use, their corners softened by countless hands. Confucian classics, collections of poetry, basic readers for younger students, simple tools for an important task. Outside, the path leading toward the village schoolhouse winds between gardens and stone walls. The scholar walks it slowly. The afternoon sun filters through tree branches overhead. A few villagers greet him respectfully as he passes. An elderly woman carrying vegetables. A carpenter repairing a gate. Two boys racing toward the stream before abruptly remembering they should probably slow down when passing a teacher. Their effort lasts approximately 3 seconds. The scholar smiles. Some lessons take time. Ahead, a modest building appears near the edge of the village. A small schoolhouse, not grand, not impressive. Just a simple wooden structure with paper windows and a tiled roof. Yet inside those walls, entire futures are being shaped. The schoolyard already contains several children waiting beneath the shade of a large tree. Some sit quietly. Some review lessons. Some appear deeply committed to doing absolutely anything except studying. A timeless educational tradition. The moment the scholar enters the courtyard, however, the atmosphere changes. The children bow respectfully. The scholar returns the gesture with warmth. No harshness, no stern lectures, only familiarity. He has taught many of them for years. Historians are still debating exactly how widespread local education becomes across different regions and social classes of Joseon Korea. But village schools play a significant role in spreading literacy and Confucian values throughout society. Not every child receives the same opportunities, yet education remains deeply respected. The scholar enters the classroom. Sunlight spills across wooden floors. Brushes and inkstones rest neatly beside low desks. Several practice sheets covered with characters dry near the windows. The room smells faintly of paper, ink, and pine wood, a pleasant combination. The students settle into their places. The afternoon lesson begins. The scholar opens a familiar text and reads slowly. His voice remains calm, measured, each character pronounced carefully. The students repeat after him, some confidently, some less confidently. One boy accidentally skips an entire line and immediately realizes his mistake. His classmates attempt not to laugh. They fail. The scholar hides a smile. Learning has always involved small embarrassments. The lesson continues. Characters are copied, passages recited, questions answered. Outside, the village carries on beneath the afternoon sun. Inside, knowledge moves quietly from one mind to another, a process so ordinary that few notice its importance, yet generations depend upon it. The scholar pauses beside a young girl practicing calligraphy. Her brush trembles slightly. The characters lean at unusual angles. The effort, however, is sincere. He offers a gentle correction. Nothing more. The next character immediately improves, a small victory, but meaningful. The afternoon passes peacefully. The classroom remains filled with soft voices, rustling pages, and the occasional scratch of brush against paper. And in a modest village schoolhouse beneath the mountains of Joseon, Korea, while sunlight shines across rice fields and bamboo groves beyond the windows, a forgotten scholar spends another quiet afternoon doing what countless forgotten teachers throughout history have done, helping the next generation learn, one lesson at a time. Part 9. The afternoon sunlight stretches across the classroom floor. Golden beams slip through the paper-covered windows, illuminating drifting specks of dust and rows of carefully arranged desks. Outside, the sounds of the village continue softly in the distance. Inside, however, the lesson remains the center of the world. The students sit quietly with brushes in hand. Some write diligently, some struggle bravely. A few seem engaged in an intense intellectual battle against distraction itself, a challenge familiar to students throughout every century. Honestly, history changes many things. Children trying not to study is not one of them. The scholar walks slowly between the desks. His footsteps are nearly silent against the wooden floor. He pauses occasionally to examine a page. A gentle correction here. A word of encouragement there. Never hurried, never harsh. Teaching, he believes, requires patience. Knowledge grows like a tree. Pulling harder does not make it grow faster. The students continue copying passages from a classical text. Character after character, line after line. Each brushstroke demands attention. One careless movement can transform meaning entirely. The room fills with a soft chorus of scratching brushes, a peaceful sound, the sound of learning. Historians are still debating how daily instruction varied across different village schools during the Joseon Dynasty, but surviving educational records suggest that memorization, reading, calligraphy, and moral instruction often form the foundation of study. The goal extends beyond literacy. The goal is character, at least ideally. Reality occasionally includes sleepy students and ink stains. One young boy accidentally brushes his sleeve across fresh ink. The result is immediate. A dark black streak stretches across the fabric. The boy freezes. His classmates notice. Several attempt to suppress laughter. They fail completely. The scholar simply smiles. The sleeve can be cleaned. The lesson continues. Outside the classroom, the afternoon breeze stirs bamboo leaves growing beside the schoolyard wall. Their shadows dance gently across the windows. A bird lands briefly on the roof before continuing its journey toward the hills. The world moves quietly around the schoolhouse. Within the room, a different kind of journey unfolds. A journey through books, through language, through ideas preserved across generations. The scholar opens another volume from his satchel. This one is older. The pages have darkened with age. The binding shows signs of careful repair. A treasured book. The students immediately sit a little straighter. They know this volume. It contains poems, and poems are different. Poetry lessons feel less like memorization and more like discovery. The scholar reads aloud. His voice remains calm and measured. The poem speaks of mountains hidden in morning mist, of rivers winding through valleys, of bamboo bending beneath snow without breaking. Simple images, yet somehow full of meaning. The students listen carefully, even the restless ones. Poetry has a way of slowing people down. The scholar asks what the poem might mean. Several hands rise. Some answers are thoughtful. Some are creative. One student becomes so enthusiastic that his explanation grows considerably longer than the poem itself. A familiar academic habit. The scholar listens patiently. The classroom fills with quiet discussion. No debates, no arguments, only curiosity. For a few moments, the room feels less like a school and more like a gathering of young thinkers learning how to observe the world, a lesson every bit as important as reading. The afternoon drifts onward. Sunlight shifts gradually across the floorboards. The shadows lengthen. Outside, farmers begin returning from the fields. The village slowly moves toward evening. The students finish their final exercises. Brushes are cleaned, inkstones washed, books carefully wrapped and stored. The day's lessons draw to a close. Before leaving, the scholar looks around the room, at the rows of desks, the drying practice sheets, the students gathering their belongings. Most of these children will never become famous. Most will never appear in official records. Some will become farmers, some merchants, some artisans, perhaps one or two scholars, yet every one of them matters. Knowledge passed forward never disappears completely. The students bow respectfully. The scholar returns the gesture. Then the classroom begins to empty. Voices drift into the schoolyard. Laughter follows. The day continues. And in a quiet village beneath the mountains of Joseon, Korea, while afternoon sunlight fades across bamboo groves and tiled rooftops beyond the schoolhouse walls, a forgotten scholar watches another generation carry their lessons home. One page, one poem, and one brushstroke at a time. Part 10, the schoolyard grows quieter. One by one, the students disappear down winding village paths carrying books wrapped in cloth bundles. Their voices drift through the afternoon air for a while longer before fading among the houses, gardens, and rice fields. The lesson is over. The village returns to its ordinary rhythm, and the scholar finds himself once again alone. Honestly, teachers throughout history probably share one universal experience. The moment the students leave, the world suddenly becomes astonishingly quiet. The scholar remains standing beneath the shade of the schoolyard tree for a few moments. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves overhead. The late afternoon sunlight has softened now, golden, warm, the kind of light poets seem incapable of ignoring. Not that the scholar minds. He has always enjoyed poetry. After locking the schoolhouse door, he begins walking slowly toward a small stream beyond the village. The path follows the edge of the rice fields before curving gently toward the foothills. The mountains watch from afar, patient as ever. The scholar carries only a slim notebook today. No heavy texts, no examination materials, no classroom records. This hour belongs to reflection, to poetry, to observing the world without needing to explain it. Joseon scholars often develop deep relationships with poetry. Writing verse is not merely entertainment, but a respected intellectual practice. Poetry allows scholars to express emotions, observations, philosophical ideas, and appreciation for nature, sometimes all at once, and sometimes with remarkable elegance. The scholar reaches a flat stone beside the stream and settles comfortably. Water moves quietly over smooth rocks. Sunlight reflects from the surface in shifting patterns. Dragonflies hover above patches of reeds near the bank. Everything feels peaceful, a perfect setting for thought. The scholar opens his notebook. Several unfinished poems already fill its pages. Some describe mountain landscapes, others record seasonal changes. A few seem inspired by little more than the movement of clouds. The subjects are simple, yet simplicity often carries surprising depth. Historians are still debating how widely poetry writing extends beyond elite circles during the Joseon period. But among scholars, composing verse becomes a common and respected habit. Many write hundreds of poems throughout their lives. Most are forgotten. A few survive. The scholar dips his brush into fresh ink, then pauses, not because he lacks ideas, because poetry requires attention. The stream provides its own rhythm. The wind contributes another. Birdsong joins occasionally. The world offers material freely. One simply has to notice. He begins writing. The characters appear slowly, carefully. A line about sunlight on water. A line about pine shadows stretching across hillsides. A line about the quiet dignity of ordinary afternoons. Nothing dramatic. No kings, no wars, no great historical events. Just life. Observed carefully. The scholar rereads the poem and smiles faintly. It may never be published. No famous official will ever praise it. Future generations will almost certainly never encounter it, and yet that seems perfectly acceptable. Not every beautiful thing requires an audience. Nearby, a pair of white herons lift gracefully from the reeds and drift across the valley. The scholar watches them disappear toward distant rice fields, then adds another line to the poem. The notebook slowly fills, page after page, observation after observation, a record not of history's great moments, but of its quiet ones. The moments most people overlook. The moments that disappear unless someone takes the time to write them down. The afternoon sun begins lowering toward the western hills. The light grows softer still. Long shadows stretch across the countryside. The stream continues its endless journey toward larger rivers and distant seas. The scholar closes the notebook and rests his hands upon his knees. For a while he simply sits, listening, watching, thinking. No urgency, no schedule. Only gratitude for another peaceful day. And beside a quiet stream beneath the mountains of Joseon, Korea, while golden afternoon light settles across rice fields, reeds, and distant village rooftops, a forgotten scholar spends another gentle hour writing poetry that few will ever read, yet which captures perfectly the beauty of an ordinary day. Part 11. The notebook rests quietly in the scholar's hands. The poem is finished, or at least finished for today. Like many scholars, he understands that a poem is never truly complete. It simply reaches a point where further changes no longer improve it. The stream continues flowing beside him, the herons have vanished into the distance, and the afternoon has begun its gentle transformation into evening. Honestly, sunsets seem to have inspired approximately half the poetry ever written. The other half was probably inspired by mountains. The scholar rises slowly from the stone beside the water and begins making his way home. The path winds through fields glowing beneath the warm amber light of late afternoon. Farmers gather tools, children return from errands. The village settles into the quieter rhythm that arrives before dusk. The air feels different now, softer, cooler, filled with the scent of earth and distant pine forests. As he walks, the scholar notices something familiar beyond a low stone wall. His garden, a small, modest garden attached to his home. Not grand enough to appear in paintings, not famous enough to attract visitors, yet deeply beloved by its owner. The gate opens with a gentle creak. Inside, the garden waits. Bamboo lines one edge of the courtyard. Chrysanthemums bloom beside a stone path. A weathered lantern stands near a patch of moss that seems to grow more beautiful with age. Everything appears simple, balanced, quiet. The scholar sets aside his notebook and walks slowly among the plants. Many Korean scholars throughout history cultivate gardens not merely for beauty, but as spaces for reflection. A garden offers lessons, patience, balance, seasonal change, the acceptance that nothing remains exactly the same. Plants become teachers too, though generally quieter than human teachers. The scholar pauses beside a bamboo grove. The tall green stalks sway gently in the evening breeze. Bamboo holds special significance throughout East Asian thought and art. It bends without breaking, remains green through difficult seasons, and grows steadily without hurry. Qualities many scholars admire. The scholar certainly does. Nearby, several chrysanthemums bloom beneath the fading sunlight. Their petals catch the golden light beautifully. Chrysanthemums appear frequently in Korean and Chinese poetry, often associated with humility, perseverance, and the quiet beauty of autumn. The scholar kneels briefly beside them, not to study, not to write, simply to appreciate. The garden asks for nothing, only attention. Historians are still debating how closely actual scholar gardens resemble the idealized versions described in literature and paintings, but surviving examples suggest that many learned men genuinely value small private spaces devoted to contemplation and nature. One does not need a palace to create peace. A few plants, a stone path, a quiet corner. Sometimes that is enough. The scholar continues walking through the garden. A small pond reflects the evening sky. Its surface remains perfectly still. A dragonfly skims across the water before disappearing into the bamboo. The mountains beyond the village glow blue and violet beneath the lowering sun. Evening approaches. A cool breeze moves through the courtyard, carrying distant sounds from the village. Laughter, cooking fires, the faint bark of a dog, life continuing beyond the garden walls. Yet the garden remains a world unto itself. The scholar settles onto a wooden bench overlooking the pond. For a while, he simply watches the changing light. No book accompanies him, no brush, no lesson plan. The day has already provided enough learning. The water reflects clouds drifting slowly across the sky. The bamboo whispers softly in the breeze. The chrysanthemums glow warmly in the fading sunlight. And in a small garden hidden within a quiet village of Joseon, Korea, while evening settles gently across tiled rooftops and distant mountains beyond the walls, a forgotten scholar spends another peaceful hour among bamboo, flowers, and the quiet beauty of a world that asks only to be noticed. Part 12. The garden grows quieter as evening settles across the village. The last golden traces of sunlight rest upon the chrysanthemums before slowly retreating toward the western mountains. Shadows lengthen across the stone path. The pond reflects a sky turning from blue to lavender. The scholar remains seated on the wooden bench. The bamboo continues whispering softly in the breeze. For several moments, nothing happens, and somehow that feels perfect. Honestly, some of history's most peaceful evenings consist almost entirely of people sitting quietly and looking at things. The scholar eventually rises and makes his way back toward the house. The garden gate closes gently behind him. Inside, the familiar rooms feel warm and welcoming after a day spent outdoors. The books remain where he left them. The writing desk waits beside the paper-covered window. The oil lamp sits ready upon the low table. Soon, darkness will arrive completely, and with it, another cherished part of the scholar's routine: evening study. Many Joseon scholars organize their days around cycles of learning. Morning reading, afternoon teaching, and evening reflection often form a rhythm repeated across decades, not because anyone demands it, because learning becomes a habit, a companion, almost a way of life. The scholar lights the oil lamp. The flame flickers briefly before settling into a steady glow. Warm light spreads across the room. The shadows retreat toward the corners. Outside, the first stars begin appearing above the village rooftops. Inside, the scholar opens a familiar book. The pages rustle softly. The sound feels comforting, like greeting an old friend. Tonight's reading is not preparation for an examination. Those ambitions faded long ago, nor is it intended for publication. The scholar reads because he enjoys reading, a surprisingly powerful motivation. Historians are still debating how many village scholars continue serious study after abandoning hopes of government office, but surviving diaries suggest that many remain devoted readers throughout their lives. Some pursue learning for status, others for employment, a few because they genuinely love knowledge itself. The scholar belongs firmly in the third group. The lamp casts a warm circle of light across the desk. Beyond that circle, The room fades gradually into darkness. The atmosphere feels peaceful, intimate, the sort of environment where concentration comes naturally. Outside, village sounds grow quieter. Families gather for evening meals. Cooking fires burn behind paper windows. Occasional voices drift through the night air, then fade. The scholar turns another page. The text discusses virtue, self-cultivation, and the responsibilities individuals hold toward their communities. Subjects familiar to generations of Confucian scholars. Yet familiarity does not diminish their importance. Some lessons become deeper each time they are revisited. A breeze moves gently through a partially opened window. The flame dances briefly. The scholar pauses and looks outside. Moonlight has begun touching the rooftops. The village appears peaceful beneath the evening sky. A dog crosses a distant courtyard. Someone closes a wooden gate. The world settles towards sleep, yet the scholar remains awake. For now, he returns to the book. The pages continue turning. The lamp continues glowing. Time passes quietly. One chapter ends, another begins. A short passage is copied onto a sheet of paper beside the desk. Not because it must be memorized, because it feels worth remembering. The scholar's handwriting remains steady, elegant, patient. Years of practice reveal themselves in every brushstroke. The ink dries slowly beneath the lamplight. Outside, the moon climbs higher. The mountains become dark silhouettes beyond the village. The stars multiply overhead. Night has fully arrived. And inside a modest home beneath the mountains of Joseon, Korea, while moonlight spreads across tiled rooftops and quiet village paths beyond the garden wall, a forgotten scholar spends another peaceful evening surrounded by books, lamplight, and the lifelong comfort of learning for its own sake. Part 13. The oil lamp burns steadily beside the scholar's desk. Its warm glow illuminates the pages before him while the rest of the room settles into soft shadows. Outside, the village has grown almost completely quiet. The day's work is finished. The fields rest beneath moonlight. The schoolhouse stands empty. Even the garden has fallen still. Only the occasional rustle of bamboo leaves disturbs the night. The scholar turns another page, slowly, thoughtfully, and for a moment you begin to wonder something. Why is he not famous? Honestly, history has a strange habit of remembering people who shout loudly while forgetting people who live wisely. The scholar has spent decades studying, teaching children, copying texts, writing poems, helping neighbors, preserving knowledge. Yet no official record celebrates his achievements. No monument bears his name. No court historian writes about his life. And yet, perhaps, that is exactly the point. Throughout the Joseon Dynasty, thousands upon thousands of scholars devote their lives to learning without ever achieving high office or lasting fame. Some fail the civil service examinations. Others choose village life over government service. Some simply live too far from centers of political power to attract attention. Their names disappear. Their influence does not. Historians are still debating how much intellectual life flourishes outside the royal court in major cities, but surviving local records reveal a world filled with teachers, poets, and scholars whose contributions shape communities in quiet ways. The scholar before you is one of them. He closes the book and gazes toward the paper window. Moonlight glows softly beyond it. The village sleeps. The mountains watch silently from the darkness. A cool breeze moves through the bamboo outside. The sound feels familiar, comforting. He reaches toward a small wooden box resting on a shelf nearby. Inside lie old papers, letters, poems, notes written years ago. Some are faded now. The ink has softened with age. The paper carries the faint scent of time itself. The scholar unfolds one carefully. It contains handwriting from a former student, a young boy he taught many years earlier. The boy eventually leaves the village, becomes a local official in a distant town, builds a family, lives a good life. The letter thanks the scholar for his guidance. Nothing elaborate, just gratitude. Yet the scholar smiles warmly as he reads. Perhaps this is what success looks like. Not recognition, not fame, not influence at court. A life that helps other lives. One student at a time, one lesson at a time, one generation at a time. Outside, a night bird calls softly from somewhere beyond the village. Then silence returns. The scholar folds the letter carefully and places it back inside the box. Nearby rests another stack of papers, his own poems, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. Most have never been shared beyond a few friends. Many describe mountains, gardens, streams, the changing seasons, ordinary moments observed carefully. The kind of writing unlikely to change history, the kind of writing that quietly enriches it. The scholar lifts one page and rereads a poem written decades earlier. The handwriting is slightly different, younger somehow, more ambitious, yet the thoughts remain familiar. Even then, he values simple things: morning tea, pine trees, books, friendship, peace. The essentials rarely change. The lamp flickers gently, the oil is beginning to run low. The scholar notices but does not immediately rise. Instead, he sits quietly, listening, reflecting. There is no sadness in his expression, no regret, only calm acceptance. Not every life becomes famous. Not every contribution becomes visible. The rice farmer who grows food, the teacher who shapes minds, the parent who raises children, the craftsman who repairs roofs, the scholar who quietly preserves knowledge. History often depends upon them all, even when history forgets their names. The moon climbs higher above the village. The mountains remain dark against the sky. The bamboo whispers softly beyond the garden wall. And inside a modest house beneath the peaceful night of Joseon, Korea, while books rest upon shelves and old letters sleep within wooden boxes, a forgotten scholar reflects upon a lifetime of quiet learning and discovers that a life does not need to be famous to be meaningful. Part 14. The letter has been returned carefully to its place. The wooden box rests once more upon the shelf beside the scholar's desk, holding decades of memories inside faded paper and aging ink. The room is very quiet now. Only the lamp remains awake. Its flame flickers gently, casting golden light across books, brushes, and handwritten pages accumulated through a lifetime of study. Outside, the village sleeps beneath the moon. The scholar sits alone, yet not lonely. There is a difference. Honestly, one of history's most overlooked skills may be learning how to enjoy one's own company. The scholar reaches toward the open notebook resting beside him. Its pages contain thoughts gathered throughout the day, observations from the morning walk, a line of poetry inspired by the stream, notes from the afternoon lesson, small fragments of an ordinary life, the sort of things most people never record, the sort of things future historians secretly wish everyone had recorded. He dips his brush into fresh ink and begins writing once more. Not a formal essay, not an official document, simply reflections, a habit many scholars maintain throughout their lives. The brush moves slowly across the paper. The characters appear one after another. Elegant, measured, patient. Outside, moonlight spreads across the courtyard garden. The bamboo casts delicate shadows against the stone path. The small pond reflects a silver circle of light from the sky above. Everything feels peaceful, still. The scholar pauses occasionally between sentences, not searching for words, listening to silence, allowing thoughts to settle naturally. The Joseon period leaves behind countless official records, government documents, examination papers, and historical chronicles, yet some of the most valuable glimpses into everyday life come from private journals and personal writings, small observations, quiet reflections, the ordinary moments that official history often ignores. The scholar's notebook belongs to that tradition, a record not of great events, but of daily life. Today's entry is simple. The mountains looked beautiful this morning. The students practiced well. The chrysanthemums are beginning to bloom more fully. The weather remains fair, nothing extraordinary, and yet everything meaningful. Historians are still debating how many personal journals from ordinary scholars have been lost over the centuries, but surviving examples reveal something striking. People in the past often worry about the same things we do. They value friendship, learning, nature, family, purpose. They notice sunsets, enjoy good tea, and occasionally complain about the weather. Human beings remain surprisingly consistent. The scholar smiles faintly while writing. Perhaps he remembers the young student who stained his sleeve with ink earlier that afternoon. Perhaps he remembers the herons by the stream. Perhaps he is simply grateful for another peaceful day. The brush continues moving, line after line. The notebook slowly fills. Eventually, he reaches the final page allocated for today's reflections. The last sentence is written carefully. Then the brush is set aside. The scholar studies the page for a moment, not critically, just appreciatively. The day now exists in words, a small victory against forgetting. He closes the notebook gently. The soft sound echoes through the quiet room. The lamp flame dances. Outside, a cool night breeze stirs the bamboo leaves once again. The scholar rises and walks slowly through the house. One final look at the bookshelves, one final glance toward the garden. Everything appears exactly as it should. The books remain ready for tomorrow. The writing desk waits patiently. The garden sleeps beneath moonlight. Nothing demands attention until morning. The scholar returns to the desk and lowers the lamp flame slightly. The room grows softer, dimmer. The long day is nearly complete. And inside a modest home beneath the mountains of Joseon, Korea, while moonlight shines across bamboo leaves and quiet village rooftops beyond the paper windows, a forgotten scholar closes the final pages of another ordinary day and preserves its memories with ink, reflection, and gratitude before sleep. Part 15. The lamp burns low. Its flame has grown small now, casting only a gentle circle of light across the scholar's desk. The notebook has been closed. The brush has been cleaned. The inkstone rests quietly beside neatly stacked papers. The day is finished. Outside, moonlight washes over the sleeping village. The mountain stands silent beyond the rooftops. The bamboo garden glimmers softly beneath the night sky. Everything feels calm. Everything feels complete. Honestly, history often celebrates dramatic endings, victorious battles, royal ceremonies, grand speeches. But most lives end their days much more quietly. And perhaps that is far more beautiful. The scholar rises from his desk and opens the wooden door leading to the courtyard. Cool night air enters the room, fresh, clean, filled with the scent of bamboo and distant pine trees. For a few moments he stands beneath the moonlight. The village is asleep. Paper windows glow faintly here and there, where a few households still keep lamps burning. A dog barks once in the distance, then silence returns. The pond in the garden reflects the moon perfectly. Not a ripple disturbs the surface. The chrysanthemums rest peacefully beside the stone path. The bamboo sways gently in the breeze. The garden seems different at night, quieter, more mysterious, yet somehow familiar. The scholar walks slowly along the path, not because he has anything left to do, simply because he enjoys the evening. Many Joseon scholars write about moonlit gardens, nighttime walks, and quiet reflection beneath the stars. The night offers something the busy hours of the day cannot: space, stillness, perspective. The scholar pauses beside the pond. Moonlight shines across the water. The reflection wavers slightly as a breeze passes through. For a moment, the world feels suspended between reality and dream. Historians are still debating how accurately surviving poems and journals reflect daily experience versus literary ideals, but one thing appears repeatedly throughout Joseon writings: a deep appreciation for simple beauty. Moonlight on water, wind through bamboo, a distant mountain, the changing seasons, ordinary things noticed carefully. The scholar smiles faintly, not because of any great discovery, because the moon is beautiful tonight. And that is enough. Eventually, he returns to the house. The door closes softly behind him. The lamp flame is lowered once more. The room dims. Books line the shelves quietly. The writing desk waits for another morning. Tomorrow will likely resemble today. Tea before dawn. Study, walking, teaching, poetry, the garden, evening reading. A life built from small routines repeated with care. Some people might call such a life ordinary. The scholar would probably agree. Yet ordinary does not mean insignificant. Thousands of forgotten teachers helped preserve knowledge through centuries. Thousands of unnamed scholars copied books, taught children, wrote poems, and lived thoughtful lives without ever entering official history. Their names faded. Their influence remained. The scholar folds his blanket and prepares for sleep. The lamp finally goes out. Darkness settles gently across the room. Outside, the moon continues shining above the village. The mountains remain watchful. The bamboo whispers softly in the night breeze. And in a quiet corner of Joseon, Korea, beneath silver moonlight and the endless stars above the mountains, a forgotten scholar closes his eyes after another peaceful day of learning, teaching, reflection, and gratitude. His name will not be remembered. His life will not appear in great chronicles. Yet his days are rich with meaning. His mind is at peace. And as the village sleeps beneath the tranquil Korean night, another gentle page turns quietly in the long story of human lives well lived. End of script. Sweet dreams.